She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for toys. She simply looked up at the woman in the elegant cafe and asked in the tiniest voice, "Can you pretend to be my mom for just one day?" To most, it would have been an odd request. But for Vivian Mallory, a 40-year-old millionaire CEO, known for her icy heart, it would become the moment that shattered everything she thought she knew about love, about loss, and about the true meaning of family. Vivian Mallory was the kind of woman who ruled boardrooms and silenced whispers when she entered the room. At just 40 years old, she had already built a business empire that stretched from luxury fashion to high-end tech acquisitions. Her name was printed in Forbes, her face flashed on TV business panels, and yet no one really knew her. Not truly. Because behind the sleek chignons, crisp suits, and cutting wit was a heart buried so deep that even she had forgotten it was there. On that cloudy Thursday morning, Vivian wasn't expecting her life to change. She had her usual corner table at Maison Elan, a cafe that served champagne truffles with espresso and had a waiting list for regulars. It was a place for people like her, those who had everything, yet carried a silent ache they never admitted. Her phone buzzed nonstop, emails poured in, and her mind wandered over the next board meeting where she'd likely fire someone for underperformance. Business was cold, calculated, and necessary. That's how she liked it, until she noticed her. The girl was standing across the street, her little face pressed up against the glass like she was staring into a world that didn't belong to her. She looked about 7 or 8 years old, skin pale under the gray sky, eyes too large for her face, framed with messy brown curls that hadn't seen a brush in days. She wore a faded pink dress that was once probably beautiful, but now had holes at the hem and dirt smudged across the chest. Her shoes were mismatched, one slipper and one sandal, and her toes curled inside them as if they were cold. She wasn't begging, she wasn't moving. She just stood there, staring straight through the window at Vivian. For a moment, Vivian froze. She was used to being stared at, envied, admired, feared, but this was different. This wasn't admiration. It was curiosity, longing, a strange kind of knowing sadness that cut through Vivian's steel walls like a blade. The girl didn't blink. A waitress tried to shoo her away, tapping at the glass and mouthing, "Go home," with a tight smile. But the girl didn't move. Instead, she slowly turned, walked around the building, and vanished. Vivian tried to brush it off. She looked at her phone again, but the emails made no sense. Her mind was drifting. It wasn't like her. She had fired assistants for less distraction than this. But something about the child had stuck. Before she knew it, her feet were moving. She stood, left a crisp $100 bill on the table, threw on her cream trench coat, and stepped out into the cold wind. The drizzle had started, small, sharp droplets that tapped her shoulders as she walked to the alley behind the cafe. And there she was, sitting on a milk crate near the dumpsters, small arms wrapped tightly around her knees, shivering slightly but not crying. Just waiting. Vivian stared for a long moment before speaking. "Are you lost?" The girl looked up, startled at first, then relaxed slightly. "No," she said quietly. "I live nearby." "You shouldn't be here," Vivian said, her voice colder than intended. "This isn't safe." The girl stood up, her tiny figure even smaller now that Vivian saw her up close. "I know," she whispered. Vivian hesitated. There was something about the way the child didn't flinch, didn't whine, didn't ask for anything, that made her uncomfortable. Then, out of nowhere, the girl stepped forward, looked up at Vivian, and asked, "Can you pretend to be my mom for just one day?" The words hit like thunder. Vivian blinked. "What?" "Just for a day," the girl said again. "Tomorrow is parent day at school, and I don't have anyone." Vivian opened her mouth, but no words came. She didn't even know this child. She had no idea where she lived, if she was telling the truth, or if this was some bizarre scam. But nothing about this girl felt dishonest. She wasn't rehearsed. She wasn't manipulating. She was just asking, "Why me?" Vivian finally asked. The girl's brown eyes searched hers. "Because you looked lonely too." And with that, the wind stopped. The world quieted. And Vivian Mallory, queen of empires and slayer of emotions, felt something stir in her that hadn't moved. In over a decade, she knelt down slowly, careful not to let her knees touch the dirty ground. "What's your name?" "Eliza," the girl replied. "Eliza," Vivian repeated, as if trying it out in her mouth. "Where's your family?" "My mom died. She got really sick when I was little," Eliza said simply. "And my dad left. I live with my aunt now. But she doesn't like schools or pretending." Vivian's jaw clenched. It wasn't her business. She didn't do emotions. She didn't play pretend. But then she thought of her own mother, long gone. Of her younger self, staring through glass windows into happy families she never got to be a part of. And suddenly, this wasn't about charity. It was about something else. A wound inside her that still hadn't closed. Eliza looked down, embarrassed. "I can understand if you don't want to. I just thought, maybe." Vivian stood and took out her business card, then paused. She crouched again and tucked the card into Eliza's tiny hand. "What school?" "Glenridge Elementary. Room 4B, Miss Fowler." Vivian nodded. "Be ready tomorrow." "I'll be there." Eliza's eyes lit up, not in wild joy, but in soft, relieved gratitude. As if someone had just told her she was worth showing up for. Vivian turned and walked away without another word. But as she rounded the corner, she let her hand rest on her chest. Her heart was beating too fast. And for the first time in years, she wasn't sure who she was anymore. She had just said yes to pretending to be a mother for a little girl she didn't even know. And somehow, it didn't feel like pretending at all. The morning of Parent Day dawned gray and slow, with a chilly breeze weaving between the tall buildings of the city. Vivian Mallory had barely slept. Her thoughts had kept circling around the strange promise she'd made to a girl named Eliza, a child she had known for less than 10 minutes. What was she thinking? Vivian, who once fired an intern for forgetting her oat milk, was now getting dressed to play mom for a stranger? She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the collar of her soft cashmere sweater, one she hadn't worn in years. It was beige, warm, approachable. Not something she'd ever wear to a board meeting. She wasn't dressing for power this morning. She was dressing for a child. Vivian's luxury SUV rolled through quiet residential neighborhoods and stopped in front of Glenridge Elementary, a modest red brick school tucked between two rundown apartment buildings. There were balloons tied to the fence. A colorful banner that read "Welcome Parents" waved weakly in the breeze. Vivian stepped out, clutching her purse like a shield. Other parents were gathering near the front doors, some in jeans and windbreakers, others in dresses and palas. No one looked like her. She felt overdressed, out of place, and deeply self-conscious for the first time in decades. She almost turned around, but then she saw her. Eliza stood by the school gate, hair brushed, cheeks pink with anticipation. She wore the same faded pink dress, but it had been scrubbed clean. Someone had done her hair in 2 crooked braids, and she was wearing different shoes, now still too big, but at least matching. She looked hopeful when she spotted Vivian. Her face broke into the smallest smile, tentative, like it might disappear if she smiled too wide. Vivian's chest ached. "Eliza," she greeted softly. "You came," Eliza said, her voice somewhere between wonder and disbelief. "I said I would," Vivian replied, trying to sound casual, but even she could hear the crack in her voice. Eliza stepped closer, looked up, and hesitated. Then very carefully she reached out and took Vivian's hand. And Vivian let her. They walked through the school doors, together like they'd done it 100 times. No one questioned them. No one stared. In that moment, they looked like any other mother and daughter connected by something deeper than blood or time. Silent understanding. Inside room 4B, Miss Fowler stood at the door, greeting each family. She was a warm woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. "You must be Eliza's mom," she said with a gentle smile. Vivian blinked. She didn't know what to say, but Eliza squeezed her hand tightly and whispered, "Please." Vivian nodded. "Yes, I'm her mother." For today, Miss Fowler didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled more warmly. "We're so glad you're here." The classroom was decorated with finger paintings, alphabet posters, and crafts made from glitter and pipe cleaners. Each child had made a handmade welcome parent card. Eliza led Vivian to her desk, a small wooden one with stickers peeling from the corners, and showed her the card she had made. It was a crayon drawing. 2 stick figures, a little girl with brown hair and a tall woman with red lips and high heels. Above their heads were scribbled words, "Me and my mom, just for today." Vivian couldn't speak. Her throat tightened. Something inside her cracked. Morning passed in a blur. Vivian sat next to Eliza during reading time. She helped her glue paper hearts onto a craft project. She even laughed genuinely when Eliza tried to explain the complicated logic behind her invisible pet caterpillar. The other children seemed to like her. One boy leaned over and whispered to Eliza, "Your mom's really pretty." Eliza blushed and nodded proudly. When snack time came, Vivian offered to help pour juice boxes. Other parents chatted easily, like they did this every week. Vivian felt like an alien among them, but Eliza never left her side. She introduced her to her friends. She bragged about how her mom was the CEO of something big, even if she couldn't remember what it was called. And then came the hardest part. Each child had to stand and say one thing they loved about their parent. Some said, "She makes the best pancakes," or "He reads me stories at night." When it was Eliza's turn, she stood nervously, looked down, and then slowly turned to face Vivian. "I don't really have a mom," she said, "but today, I have someone who showed up." She held my hand, she smiled at me, and she made me feel like I mattered. The room fell silent. Vivian's eyes stung. Miss Fowler clapped quietly. "That's beautiful, Eliza." After the event ended, the parents began to leave. Vivian knelt down and helped Eliza zip up her coat. "Thank you," Eliza whispered. "I'll never forget this." Vivian brushed a curl from her cheek. "Neither will I." She stood to leave, but something made her stop. "Can I walk you home?" Eliza nodded eagerly. They walked 3 blocks to a gray apartment complex with cracked steps and rusty mailboxes. Eliza paused at the 2nd floor and pointed to a door. "This is it." Vivian nodded, unsure of what to say, but the door opened before they could knock. A woman in her late 30s stood there, disheveled, cigarette dangling from her mouth, mascara smudged. She stared at Vivian with narrowed eyes. "Who are you?" "Eliza invited me for Parent Day," Vivian said calmly. "Just for today," the woman scoffed. "Well, thanks for playing house. You can go now." She pulled Eliza inside by the arm too roughly. Vivian's instincts flared. "Is she safe here?" The woman glared. "Mind your business." Before she shut the door, Eliza turned back, eyes filled with panic. She mouthed one word, "Help," and then the door slammed shut. Vivian stood there, heart racing. Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone. She had no idea what she was doing. But one thing was clear: pretending wasn't enough anymore. That girl needed more than just a fake mother for a school day. She needed someone who wouldn't walk away, and for the first time in her life, Vivian Mallory knew she couldn't. Vivian Mallory didn't remember walking back to her car. She didn't remember the hum of the engine starting or the way the city faded around her. All she could see were Eliza's eyes, wide, silent, desperate. That one word, "help," had carved itself into her chest like a blade. She had walked away from so many things in life. Her childhood, her broken relationship with her brother, even love. She had become a fortress, proud of her control. But something in Eliza had undone her so easily, not through anger, not through drama, but through need. She wasn't pretending anymore. Vivian parked in front of her penthouse and just sat behind the wheel, unmoving. The glass towers loomed above her like a cage of wealth. Inside that penthouse was silence, expensive wine, and a lonely piano no one played anymore. And outside somewhere, a little girl sat behind a rusted door with someone who had yanked her arm too hard. She knew abuse when she saw it. She had grown up with it. Her father had been powerful too, at least in his small world. But power without kindness was just cruelty with a title. Vivian remembered hiding under tables. She remembered the bruises no one asked about. She remembered the ache of watching her mother shrink a little more each year. She had sworn she'd never feel powerless again. And now, a little girl had reminded her that power meant nothing if it couldn't protect the innocent. She got out of the car. The next morning, she returned to Glenridge Elementary not as Eliza's pretend mother, but as a woman on a mission. She asked for the school counselor, a soft-spoken woman named Mrs. Acker. They sat in a small office that smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. "I'm not family," Vivian began, her voice low, "but I think one of your students is in danger." Mrs. Acker's expression shifted instantly. "Go on." Vivian told her everything she knew. Eliza's story, the bruises on her arm, the filthy apartment, the woman who yanked her like she was nothing more than a burden. She didn't have photos, no evidence. Just a sinking gut instinct, sharpened by a lifetime of reading people. Mrs. Acker listened carefully. "Thank you for telling us. We've had some concerns about Eliza, but without any formal complaint or proof, it's hard to intervene quickly." Vivian's hands curled into fists. "Then let me do more. I want to help her. Are you willing to file a report?" The counselor asked gently. "Even if it means getting involved with child services." Vivian paused. She thought of the headlines. "CEO interferes in custody case." The shareholders would hate it. Her image, carefully crafted to exude power and poise, could crumble. But she also thought of Eliza's voice, so small, asking, "Can you pretend to be my mom?" There was no pretending anymore. "I'll do it," she said. What followed was a whirlwind of bureaucracy. Vivian filed a formal report. She signed statements. She answered questions from social workers who looked at her like she was crazy, a billionaire voluntarily getting involved with a neglected child. She went back to the apartment complex with a caseworker and watched as they knocked on the door. The woman, Eliza's aunt, tried to play sweet, but her tone soured the moment she realized Vivian had reported her. "You rich witch," she spat. "Trying to take my niece just to feel good about yourself?" Vivian didn't flinch. "I'm doing what someone should have done years ago." The authorities didn't remove Eliza that day. These things took time. But an investigation was opened. And for now, the school kept a closer watch. Vivian didn't stop. She hired a private investigator to check the aunt's history. She used her influence quietly to push the case forward. She visited Eliza at school every few days, bringing small gifts, a pair of good shoes, a warm sweater, books with adventure stories. At first, Eliza seemed confused. "You're still here?" she asked one afternoon. Vivian knelt beside her desk. "I told you I'd come back, but it's not Parent Day." "I don't care," Vivian smiled. "You matter every day." Eliza hugged her for the first time. Vivian didn't even know she needed that hug until her arms wrapped around that small, shaking body, and she felt something melt inside her. Something she didn't know had frozen over. Weeks passed. The case moved forward. The aunt grew hostile and eventually disappeared, packed up and left town. She didn't even leave a note. Just vanished. Eliza was taken in temporarily by emergency foster care. The social worker called Vivian the same day. She keeps asking for you, the woman said. Every hour, she won't eat. She won't talk. To the other children, I know this isn't conventional, but would you consider visiting? Vivian didn't hesitate. She arrived at the foster home that evening, modest, cluttered, and full of children. But Eliza was sitting alone on the edge of a bed, her knees pulled up, staring at the wall. When she saw Vivian, she blinked twice like she couldn't believe it. You came, she whispered. Vivian sat down beside her. Of course I did. Eliza leaned into her chest and didn't let go for hours. That night, Vivian stayed until the girl fell asleep in her lap. By the time the courts began discussing long-term placement, Vivian was already there, at every hearing, every meeting. The lawyers called her unusual. The judge raised an eyebrow. Miss Mallory, do you understand the commitment you're proposing? You're a high-profile CEO. This isn't just charity work. I'm not interested in charity, she replied. I'm interested in being her mother. The courtroom went silent. The judge looked at Eliza, who sat quietly holding Vivian's hand, and then he smiled. 3 months later, Vivian Mallory walked out of family court with legal custody of Eliza Rose Bennett. She wasn't pretending anymore. She bought a modest townhouse outside the city, warm, sunlit, and full of plants. No boardrooms, no cold walls. Just a kitchen where they made pancakes on Saturdays. A backyard with wildflowers. And a room full of books and stuffed animals where Eliza slept curled in a blanket she had picked out herself. Vivian still ran her company. But now she came home every night. Sometimes Eliza would look up from her drawings and whisper, "Do you ever miss being alone?" Vivian would smile and kiss her forehead. Not for 1 second. Months passed. Autumn faded into winter, and the townhouse Vivian bought became a living, breathing home. The walls that once echoed silence now hummed with quiet giggles. The soft padding of tiny feet in pajamas, and the occasional shout of, "You burned the pancakes again." From the kitchen on sleepy Saturday mornings, Vivian still wore tailored suits and attended investor meetings, but something had shifted inside her. She no longer checked her reflection for power but for warmth. She no longer built walls, but found herself opening doors. And every time she heard, "Mom, can you help me with this?" her heart responded like it had waited years to be called by that name. But what surprised Vivian the most wasn't how deeply she came to love Eliza. It was how much Eliza began healing something in her. Vivian had never spoken much about her own childhood, not to friends, not to journalists, not even to the therapist her assistant once begged her to try. It had always been easier to wrap herself in success and pretend the rest didn't happen. But Eliza, she asked questions that no one else dared to. "Mom," she said one snowy evening while they sat on the couch reading, "where's your mom?" Vivian's chest tightened. She looked down at the cocoa she was stirring and said, "She passed away a long time ago." "Did she love you?" Vivian froze. No boardroom in the world had ever made her this uncomfortable. "She tried," she answered honestly. "But she was scared of my father, so she didn't protect me." Eliza's voice went soft. "Did your dad hurt you?" Vivian nodded once. Very slowly, the little girl reached across the couch and wrapped her small fingers around Vivian's. "You protected me. You're not like them." Vivian hadn't cried in 20 years. Not when she closed her first $1 million deal. Not when she lost friends or clients, or even when her father died. But that night, she cried, not loud, not dramatic, but slow, aching tears that slid down her face as Eliza laid her head in her lap. And for the first time, she didn't cry alone. They built a life, not a perfect one. There were still tantrums, spilled milk, forgotten homework, and late-night fevers. But there was also piano practice on Sunday mornings, handwritten notes tucked into briefcases, and bedtime stories that turned into long talks about dreams, fears, and who they used to be before they found each other. Vivian learned how to French braid hair from YouTube. After Eliza said she wanted to look like the girls at school. She learned to say sorry, to admit when she was scared, and to listen not like a CEO, but like a mother. And Eliza? She began to blossom. Her once hollow eyes grew brighter. She no longer stood apart from other kids. She laughed loudly. She started painting beautiful swirling patterns of women in tall heels holding hands with little girls. And one day, she came home from school with a drawing titled, "My Forever Mom." Vivian framed it and placed it above the fireplace. But one winter afternoon, something happened that neither of them expected. A letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Just one word written in shaky pen. Father. Vivian opened it slowly, heart pounding. Inside was a short, scrawled note. I saw you on the news. You adopted a kid? Funny. Thought you'd be like your mother and stay quiet. Forever. Guess not. You turned out better than I expected. Don't worry, I'm not coming back. Just wanted to say I was wrong. Dad. Her hands trembled. Eliza watched her from across the kitchen. What is it? Vivian stared at the letter for a long time. Then she folded it in half, calmly walked over to the fireplace, and tossed it into the flames. The paper curled and burned, turning into ash. It's nothing that belongs in our home, she said. Eliza looked up at her, then nodded. Okay, and just like that, Vivian let go of decades of fear. Spring arrived with sunlight, daffodils, and field trips. Vivian volunteered as a chaperone for Eliza's science museum outing, something the old version of herself would have rolled her eyes at. She watched. Eliza explained constellations to another girl, gesturing with her hands, beaming with confidence. She was growing fast, already a head taller, her laughter louder, her gaze unafraid. A teacher approached Vivian quietly. You know, she said, Eliza told the class something beautiful the other day. Oh? Vivian smiled. She said, my mom didn't grow me in her belly. She grew me in her heart. Vivian had to turn away to blink the tears back. One evening, almost a year to the day after they met, Eliza and Vivian sat in the garden planting flowers. Eliza wore an old t-shirt, 2 sizes too big, and had dirt smeared across her cheeks. Do you ever think, Eliza asked, poking the soil, what if I never asked you that question in the cafe? Vivian looked up from her spade. Every single day. What made you say yes? Vivian put down the tool, brushed a smudge of dirt from Eliza's nose, and said softly, because when you asked me to pretend to be your mom, I realized I'd been pretending to be okay for years. And something about you, your courage, your honesty made me want to be real again. Eliza blinked. So, I helped you too, Vivian smiled. You saved me, sweetheart. You gave me something I never thought I deserved. Eliza crawled into her lap, dirt and all, and hugged her tight. I love you, Mom. I love you more. That night, Vivian opened the piano for the first time in years. Her fingers stumbled over the keys at first, but Eliza sat beside her, pressing notes at random, giggling when they clashed. And together, they made the kind of music that no audience could hear, but any heart could feel. In that home, in the warmth of shared scars and second chances, a woman who once lived in silence learned how to speak again. And a child who had only known loss learned what it meant to belong, not through blood, not through law, but through the most unexpected miracle of all, a single whispered question. Can you pretend to be my mom for one day? And a woman brave enough to answer yes, even when she didn't know. It would change both their lives forever.